Sekou Cooke. I'm an architect and an urban designer. I have a studio, an architecture studio called Sekou Cooke Studio, and I also am currently the director of the Masters of Urban Design program at UNC Charlotte. So the short elevator pitch version of what hip-hop architecture is that it's hip-hop culture in built form, and that means different things for different people. But if you think about the genesis of hip-hop culture, it wasn't just music. Music is a really important, essential part of it. The communication between the DJ and the b-boy, the dancers, was at the center of that. And then, of course, the MC came later to rhyme on top of the tracks that the DJ was laying down. And then graffiti was kind of a backdrop to all of that. That was happening simultaneously, in parallel. And somehow architecture was the piece that was lost out of the hip-hop movement. So the main argument that I've been making is that we, the hip-hop generation, should be producing architecture that's of that same cultural vein as produced all the great music, dancing, and culture. We Outchea, Hip-Hop Fabrications and Public Space was a project originally commissioned by MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, as part of a group show called Reconstructions, Architecture and Blackness in America. And that show started with the curator Sean Anderson and Mabel Wilson, and they created a whole advisory board of Black scholars and architects and designers to think through this missing element in the story of MoMA's architecture and design collection, where they had, for over 100 years, had 0 permanently collected works by Black architects. So there was a longer effort with some writing and some other academic products, but the exhibition, the mission of the advisory board was really to identify contemporary Black scholars who are also architects and designers to look at this idea of Blackness and architecture in America through the lenses of cities across the United States. But since I'd been living in Syracuse for quite a long time and researching a lot of the histories of Syracuse, I knew that the history of Syracuse was the history of Blackness in America, especially when it comes to the built environment. So the land itself that all of the city is on is originally Onondaga land. It's part of the Onondaga Nation territory, which was somehow sold or willed over to the city. And then in the area that I'm most specifically looking at, the 15th Ward, that became the center of Black culture in the city throughout the mid-40s and 50s. And into the beginning of the 60s, when the massive hand of urban renewal came through and wiped out a lot of that business, the culture, all the things that happened there. And that story begins in 1938 with the building of Pioneer Homes, which was on the land that used to be single-family houses or duplexes, walkable communities that were there. Many of those houses were just cleared out, flattened, and Pioneer Homes was built in its place. It's a center of low-income housing in the city. Next came the redevelopment of the city center. All of the 15th Ward was wiped out to create the On Center, the War Memorial, the Everson Museum that we're sitting in right now. The entire civic center of the city is right on top of all of these layers, beginning with Onondaga land, the 15th Ward, and then what we see now today. So I was really studying all of those different layers of history, especially added in the I-81, which not only ripped through the center of the 15th Ward, but also split Pioneer Homes into 2 sides. So it went right through the same public housing project that had been built just about 30 years earlier, or less than 30 years before. So I was looking at all these various layers and thinking like a DJ, like a hip-hop DJ that's digging through crates, finding really loose samples, thinking about pieces of history that might have been lost, and pulling them to the surface, bringing them up, thinking about how they might intersect and interact with each other, and thinking about that within the context of the newly proposed Blueprint 15 project that's looking at all the areas of Pioneer Homes, McKinney Manor, and other low-income housing projects in the area, other sets of property, land that's owned by the Syracuse Housing Authority, to convert that all into mixed income housing. So I've projected a kind of proto-future of what that would look like. The new development that is a kind of banal blank slate of mixed income housing, mixed density, and then intersecting that, subtracting from that the memory, the history of the houses that used to be there, from pioneer homes to the original houses that were there before, and revealing on the ground and in the spaces in between the new buildings these new little follies of activity that would be areas of informal activity to be programmed by any of the people who found themselves still living there. So it's a sense of defiance, a sense of saying that since Black people in this country have always been placed and displaced from one place to another, this time maybe they refuse to be moved, refuse to be displaced, and reclaim this public arena that used to be their home.